Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Smart Divorce podcast. And I'm really happy to be joined today by Adele Ballatyne. Hi Adele, how are you doing?
Hi Tamsin, I'm really good, thank you. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm good, thank you. I'm very much looking forward to digging deeper into your work. So to introduce you properly, Adele is owner and principal therapist at a leader consultancy. She's been working as a relationship therapist for a decade and a half, helping individuals, couples and families manage relationships that are stuck. She works predominantly in the divorce and separation space. Adele is passionate about early intervention work and reducing the emotional damage to children during their parents' separation. She also works with family law professionals, proving, trying, and support. Not sure if I've read that right.
We'll expand. It's fine.
we'll dig deeper. I guess the starting point is that we've talked lots on this podcast about having the three areas covered when you're going through divorce of legal support, financial support, and emotional support. And your work ticks a massive tick against the box of emotional support. So I guess to start with, what sort of clients come to you when abouts in the divorce process would they contact you?
So I see clients, it might be right at the beginning before they've even made the decision to separate. So I'll often work with couples who are going through difficult times. Some of those couples manage to resolve issues, repair and regrow a new relationship that works better for them, and that's great, and off they go. Others come and they're really struggling, and I suppose the work with those couples right at the beginning, we're looking at, okay, where are you now, how did you get there, and what do you want to do next? And that's really important. So we will work through those questions, and then we might get to a point where they're like, oh, so what's that going to look like if we separate? So then we might have some sessions that say, well, if you stay together and work at it, all of these issues, what could that look like? Then we look at what happens if you choose to separate. What would life look like then? And especially if they have children. And that's a really important session because it provides a safe space for them to explore what separation might look like before they've made that decision. And then there's the third one, which is quite interesting. And for a lot of people, they don't understand, if they're not in that position, why I would do that. But we look at, what would life be like if you agree to stay together but don't make any changes? And that's equally important, because lots of people do that. Lots of people will say, well, we'll put up with each other until the kids are older and then we'll leave, but then that leads to other conversations. So I'll see people right at the beginning. I'll see people who have been to see their lawyers and who are then have been sent. That's really good when a family lawyer will say, go and see Adele. That's really lovely, because I can then start that important early intervention work about their journey. And then I see people who have been divorced and who have perhaps been co-parenting really well, but then they've hit some bumps in the road and they need some help with that. So really, it's along the whole timeline of a couple relationship that's in trouble, to one that's ended, but they're now meeting some issues.
Right. So many questions just from that. So I guess the first and most straightforward question is you talk most of that way through about working with couples. Is it always the couple together that you see, or do you work with one-to-one as well?
No, I do one-to-one, because sometimes, and also this just really depends on where I meet that couple. So if I meet a couple together right at the beginning, then it's usual to work with the couple right the way through. Sometimes if they come to me through word of mouth referral or a solicitor referral or mediator referral or wherever, then sometimes it's one person. So I had 3 new inquiries yesterday, and they were all from people who said their ex-partners are really not interested in doing any work around resolving co-parenting issues. And so in those instances, I'll work with that individual to provide them with some understanding and some strategies, and to also reassure them sometimes that actually it's okay for them to carry on being the parent they're being, and to do it their way, you know, and how to manage a hostile ex, or a difficult ex, or someone who just won't speak to them and they get no communication at all. You know, how do you manage to co-parent when you've got an ex who is more challenging?
With difficulty.
Yeah, sadly.
Yeah. A question. I'm going to take you back a bit, but I do want to talk about co-parenting a bit more. When you're meeting with a couple who haven't yet made the decision to separate, do you often find that they come in where you feel that one party actually has made the decision that it's done, and therefore there's a kind of disparity in where they're at emotionally?
Yeah.
And how do you deal with that?
Yeah, a lot of the time that is the case. If somebody said to me, "I'm waving a magic wand, Adele, what would you have couples do?" And I say, "Come earlier." You know, if you have a toothache and it starts off as just a niggle every time you have a cup of tea, and you leave it, chances are it'll either settle or it'll get worse. But, you know, if you notice it's starting to get worse and you don't go and see the dentist, then you could end up in big trouble, and you could lose the tooth. And in a way, that's a bit like a relationship. So if they had come sooner, it's really interesting, because I've just read a book called The Last Resort, and it was a fiction book. I was on holiday, and it was about talk about busman's holiday. It was about a therapist, but it wasn't about the therapy per se, but it was called The Last Resort because this couple had gone to see the therapist as a last resort. If I had £1 for every time somebody said to me, "You are our last hope," and I am so sad about that, because if people came sooner, you know, I see people prenup as well, before they get married, before they commit to moving in together. I've got a really good series of 10 sessions where we sit down and we look at what's good, you know, we look at behavior. How do you know when your partner's not happy? You know, so if we learn more about relationships and don't see relationship therapy or couples therapy or whatever you want to call it as we're going because, you know, this is the last resort. If we could view it more as like we would going to the dentist and resolving that would be really helpful. And I wouldn't see the majority of people who come to see me as couples who are really, yeah, one of them has made the decision, usually some time ago, about 18 months in my view.
Oh, crikey. That's really struck a chord with me. That feels really important. The work that you do, even like we're not here to talk about prenup work really, but actually that's really struck a chord with me, because actually that kind of work in a second relationship actually might be massively useful if you've been through a divorce yourself in a previous relationship. Actually, to go through that in the second relationship, to kind of prepare you both for the what you might go through, that actually might be incredibly valuable. I didn't realize that was something that you did, but that's amazing.
Yeah, it's any part of that relationship timeline, really. And it's interesting because it's not only about, because if we look, I'm not good with statistics, I'm dyslexic with stuff like that, or dyscalculic, whatever you want to call it. But you know, blended families now are beginning to outweigh the nuclear family as we would know it. And if we think about that, you know, that's been happening gradually over the last decade or so. And when we have children within those blended families, you know, they grow up witnessing all the complications that have not been resolved from their parents' original unions, marriages, whatever, and then they come into this blended family, which again, you know, can be wonderful if managed well, but also can be complicated and multiple times, you know, blended family is multiple. So if we think about that, and in terms of how those children grow up and then form their own relationships, they're already coming in with very different views about what's okay, what's not okay, how men treat women, how women treat men, how mums treat dads, vice versa. You know, so the work that we do within divorce and separation right now is so important, because it will seriously and has been seriously affecting the mental health, well-being and lives and relationship lives of future generations.
Oh no, you're absolutely spot on in what you say. I'm a child of divorced parents, and I'm also divorced myself, so I've seen it from both sides, and I know the impact that it can have. And you know, my mum and dad absolutely, you know, did the best that they possibly could. But you know, we're all human, and we all make mistakes. And when I divorced, there were some things that I did differently to avoid impacting my children. But you know, at the end of the day, you don't really understand fully what impact you've had, your behaviour has had on the kids, any of it, let's be honest, not just in relationships, any of it. So yeah, that's really fascinating.
And we're human at the end of the day, you know, Tamsin, aren't we? We're not perfect as parents. We're not perfect as human beings. We get stuff wrong. Relationships are really complex. I've been doing this job a long time. I'm still learning. I had a really interesting conversation the other day with somebody about people who push themselves forward as experts. And you know, I'm not saying that they shouldn't do that. That's up to them what they do. I don't think I would ever put myself down as an expert. I'm someone who has expertise, and I can facilitate, you know, a journey for somebody and help them to see things from very different perspectives. I don't necessarily have to walk in your shoes to know what your life is like when, as a separated person. You know, actually, sometimes it's better if I don't, if I'm very different. So, you know, this is about understanding that relationships are hard work. We are emotional beings. Whether we have been encouraged as children and in our growing up life to express emotion, to regulate emotion, to be resilient and be able to sit with discomfort in a way that is healthy for some of the time. If we've been unable to do that, then we progress better through something like a separation. Do we make mistakes still? Absolutely. But if we have a partner who is the opposite of that, who has lived with a family who sweep things under the carpet, who never talk about things, who never sit and have conversations, and chances are if you're a partner who's had the conversation and the encouragement and the enablement, chances are you're going to pick the partner who is opposite to that. And so managing that at a time of huge emotional stress, you know, is hard. So we've got to go easy on ourselves a little bit, but we do need to be informed about what our behaviour as an adult is going to do to our children and how we can reduce the risk of that happening.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I'm reading a book at the minute. It's called You, Me. It might be the other way around. Might be Me, You in the Space in Between, it's called, and it's written by a couple. And they're like, yes, we're saying that we can help you with your relationship, but we don't always get it right. And we've been doing this work a long time. And if you look at our relationship, we do still bicker. We do go through periods where we struggle with our communication, even though we know all the tools. And I think that we've got to accept that, you know, even if we know everything about a particular subject, as you say, we are only human. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect in that world for us. I'm interested to know, so if let's start with, it might differ for a couple or an individual, but if somebody wants to work with you, contacts you and says, hi, I've been recommended to come and speak to you, I believe you're amazing, what happens next?
Okay, that would be nice, firstly. That would be lovely. Actually, it is nice when somebody comes as a word of mouth recommendation. You saw my friend, and that was helpful. That is really lovely. And because getting testimonials from people doing what I do is difficult, because nobody wants to admit they've been to see somebody like me, because it's seen in a negative light. Anyway, so your question. So what happens? So basically, I usually email, because I spend a lot of time in consultation. It's really hard always to speak to somebody on the phone. I do try to, but initially I will contact them via email, and I will arrange either a brief conversation if they want to ask something in particular before they start. Sometimes they'll say, can we start working straight away? That's not a problem. I usually see, if it's a couple, I usually see them individually to start with for a session, and then together as a couple, if it's safe to do so. And then I work very collaboratively with a couple. So I'm not the sort of therapist who says, right, 10 sessions once a week, and then we'll review. I don't do that. We take it session by session. Depends on the work, what they are hoping for, what they want to go and try. Time is a factor. If you're working on your relationship in whatever way, whether it's co-parenting as a divorced couple, or whether it's working to regrow a relationship, it's got to have some priority in your life, because it will take time. Often couples who don't prioritize. So I remember many years ago, a couple who came to see me, desperate, Adele, we're desperate to get this back on track. And I said, okay. And at the end of each session, I sent them away with something to try, something to put into their everyday life. And every time they came back, they said, no, we haven't done it. We've been too busy. So we had to have the conversation. After they'd done it 3 times, I just said, right, let's stop. Tell me why you're not doing the homework. And they ended up separating because they didn't really want to be together, but they thought they should be. So it's really interesting, that. So it has to be for me. Other people work in different ways. So sometimes I'll see them as a couple, and then I might see them 2 weeks later, depending on what's going on. Sometimes it's a month later. It's how much time they have to fit it in. It's never more than once a week. Some people say, can I come back tomorrow? No, absolutely not. Because an hour with me emotionally is like a bit of a marathon, and it's exhausting, and it will trigger some thoughts, some emotions, something that perhaps you've buried, and that might not come for a few days, and so we have to let time happen for people to reflect and to think, before they come back.
It's interesting that you say it's exhausting. I've had various forms of therapy over the years, and I'm perfectly happy to fess up to whoever's listening on this. I'm sure I've said it before anyway. But I remember the first time I went, this was a hypnotherapy session actually, but the first time I went for hypnotherapy, I think it was an hour and a half or something that I was with the therapist, and I came back and slept for 3 hours. I was absolutely shattered. There was no way I could have gone back for more the following day. And then what I noticed was my mind and my emotions processing things and having weird dreams as well. Because it's that unconscious, isn't it? It's everything kind of working itself through.
Absolutely.
So interesting and massively unexpected from me. And I imagine the people that you're working with are experiencing a similar thing.
They do, and not only during the therapy, because quite often when they come to me, they're already on at a certain level of emotional exhaustion because of what
Sure.
they've been going through in their relationship. You know, usually when relationships start to break down, it can be months or sometimes years in the making. And so by the time they come to me, they're already quite fatigued emotionally. And they may or may not realize that. They may just think, oh, I work so hard at the moment, I'm so exhausted. Well, some of that will be work, but some of it, if you're not happy, will be that emotional fatigue. And so quite often in sessions, we'll talk about that. You know, I will often say to clients, look, this might feel worse before it better, because it often does. You know, you might go away from a session thinking, what the heck is this even about? I don't even know why we're going. And then the next time you might think, thank God I've come back. You know, because we go all over the place, you know. And I remember a client once saying to me, I've been seeing them for a while, so we had quite a good relationship, and I remember him saying, we'd had a particularly challenging session, and I'd asked some quite direct questions, and he'd said, "Bloomin' heck, Adele, you really don't mince about, do you, with your words?" And I said, "Well, hey, you could be paying me, you know, to sit here with a nice cup of tea, chatting about what the weather's like and how lovely the world is, and your relationship is going to stay the same, or we can, you know, use this space, you know, to explore the difficult things that you've struggled to explore, knowing that I've got this for you, and you're going to be safe, and we will get to, before you leave, I will bring you back to that safe space so you can leave the room and feel relatively okay." You know, people, you don't have therapy just to sit and have a nice cozy chat. You have therapy to find out what the heck is going on.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. One of the things that I really like about you, Adele, is that you don't mince words.
I don't. What's the point?
Right.
Life is short, hey.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm Clive Macklin last week for the podcast, and she was talking to me about how she prepares for a meeting. I'm interested in how you get yourself ready for a session with clients.
It's variable depending on who's coming, and whether it's an initial consultation where I'm finding out, or whether it's ongoing. Obviously, I keep notes. They're quite scant. They usually consist of just one or two words that will help me remember a conversation. And I really don't know how I do it, but I rarely forget clients I've worked with. I might forget their name, but the minute they start talking about, oh, I saw you about 4 years ago and you helped with this, I think, oh, I know who they are. And I remember, you know, a lot about those sessions. So I might just glance through the notes from the last session, see what we've been talking about. But again, I'm not really prepared. I don't have an agenda, because it's not about me. It's not about me. It's not about whether I've had similar experiences. It's not about whether, you know, that's something that I've never come across. It doesn't really matter what people bring. So I tend to just glance through those notes, and then I start the session and I say, okay, so where are we going today? What are we going to talk about today? And quite often people don't expect that when they first start coming. They think I'm going to be saying, right, today we're going to be talking about this, this, and this. And so some sessions can be quite directive. When we're talking about, if we've got parents saying, well, how can we be better co-parents? Then I might talk a little bit more during the session to talk about things like what children need from you as co-parents, what happens when you get it right, you know, things that you can do to make communication good, what happens when you meet difficulties in, you know, along the way. So sometimes it's more of an educational session. and then it may be that the next session with them is because they've identified something from the last session that they think they're going to struggle with. So we talk about, okay, how can we resolve? So in terms of prep, there's not an awful lot of prep that I do. I know when I've had referrals from the court, they say, oh, we'll send you the bundle. And I said, don't send me the bundle, because I'm not going to read it. I don't want to read somebody else's view about a couple and what's happened to them. Yeah. I want to find out. And because I don't know that those professionals have listened properly. I don't know that they inquired enough about when they've said, oh, they're really controlling, whether they've just written X is controlling, or whether they said, talk to me about that. Help me to understand what that looks like for you. Because chances are they may have done. Yeah. But, maybe they don't. And so I don't want to read somebody else's view. I want to make my own. Yeah. So I think that in terms of prep, there isn't an awful lot, because I work with what happens on the day.
Do you do anything to prepare yourself? Do you I don't know, do you make yourself a cup of tea? Do you put lippy on? I've heard so many different things over the years about how people kind of mentally prepare themselves to be in that space where their own mind is clear of their thoughts, so that they can be present for the people in front of them. So do you have a ritual around that, or is it like, I've been doing it so long, I just sit down and I'm there?
No, I do. And, I think some of that comes from, because I used to be a nurse years ago. And of course, as soon as you put your uniform on, you are stepping into a role where you become that professional. And, some of the things as a nurse that you have to do to people aren't really very nice. And going in without a uniform on, it's not as arming, if you like, as going in as that professional. So, and as a paediatric nurse, obviously I did some awful things to young children in the way of helping them to get better. And so, that does help. So, and it is interesting because during the pandemic, I dressed for work every day. I didn't sit there with just a blouse on and my PJ bottoms and some fluffy slippers, because for me that's not but I just couldn't do that. So I would get up, I'd get dressed, I'd put my lippy on, I'd do my hair, and I put my shoes on, because shoes are quite important for me. And or sometimes bare feet in the summer because it was quite hot, but generally I find, yes, I have to do that. And I think it just gets your mind ready for what's ahead. I'm going to work, even though I'm working from home and I'm on my computer, but I'm in my office, and this office is a place of work. And so I do that. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I like that idea of, like, I get ready for work. This is my, it was my spare room pre-COVID. It's now my office. But as soon as I come in here, that, like, right, I'm in work mode now. I'm here and prepared and ready to be here for my clients. What's going on in my world is outside that door, and it stays out there. It's really fascinating. So aside from the work that you do face to face with clients, where you're in sessions, what else does your work involve? What other things are going on outside of in work, but outside of face to face sessions?
Okay, so I deliver a lot of seminars for usually people in the family law sector. I deliver training both for clients and for professionals. I think wherever I can go and help people to understand more about this process and what happens to families, through this process so that we can make it a kinder process, then that's a good thing. I'm writing a book at the moment, and so hopefully that will be out at some point if I can write the second half, which is interesting. What else do I do? Yeah, I present at conferences and yeah, that sort of thing, really. I'm always reading and learning and thinking. I do spend quite a bit of time, because I don't think we do that enough. We've got these massive brains in our heads that can do amazing things, and yet our time for allowing the creative side to come through, we don't always give time for that. And for me, that's how I work a lot of stuff out, and I think about, okay, what might be helpful with that client, or what might be helpful in that workshop, or even just thinking about the effects of what's going on in the world, and what effect that will have on us as, firstly, human beings, but secondly, as social beings and communities of people together, and families being one of those communities. And that's something I spend a lot of time. I have supervision with my clinical supervisor once a month for an hour and a half, and we often talk about things like that, the effects of the pandemic on, mental health, on, fear. There's been such a lot of fear, and we look now at that time, which was so scary, wasn't it? We were locked in our homes, and there was this unseen danger, and now we're just walking around as if nothing had ever happened. And there are all those people who have long COVID, and then people out there who are trying to disprove that even long COVID exists. Well, it matters. If you're there and you were functioning perfectly well before you had COVID, and now you struggle to get around, if you hear something like that, what does that do to you? What does that mean for you? We have to be careful. And I must admit, I was quite selective, and still am, actually, with news and things like that, because we live in a world of information, don't we, that is so easy to get to. And anybody has a voice now and can reach hundreds and thousands and millions of people. Not all of those voices are carefully considered, and we have to be selective.
Yeah, no, I think
I do spend a lot of time thinking.
Do you know, it's interesting. When you were saying that you spend time thinking, I know certainly at the moment my diary is insanely busy with being in meetings, but actually, as a result of that, my thinking time is not necessarily work time. So I might be in the shower and I'll think, oh, I should do that for that client. Oh, I wonder if we just looked at it a slightly different way. I wonder if we did that, because it's my brain processing it when I'm in that space for thinking, which might be in the shower, or it might be when I go for a run, or it's when you're doing something else, because your brain needs to process those things that are going on. So actually setting time aside for thinking seems like it seems like such a simple idea.
Yeah, but in a work environment, how many of the listeners listening to this podcast, how many of you would be seen to be working if you were sitting at your desk thinking? It's like billable hours for lawyers, isn't it? Is it 6-minute intervals, something like that? Yeah. I think that is one of the most dreadful things ever to submit a human being to, because all it does is make money. It does nothing for that person's well-being. It does nothing to reflect the quality of the work of that practitioner. and
Yeah.
it causes so much stress, you know. And what we're learning about the human body is that stress, what, you know, that's just one aspect, leads to inflammation in our bodies. What happens when we live with long-term inflammation? We get sick. So if you switch on your computer in the morning and you see a graph which reflects how much money you're making because of the minutes that you're billing for, and you're not doing so well, but you've worked a 12-hour day and you've
Yeah.
not really slept because you know that you've got another 12-hour day tomorrow and you've got some really challenging work right now, that's really not going to help. And if you're neurodiverse, that's really not going to help you. So we need to be thinking in a different way, because we need to understand that sometimes somebody sitting at their desk thinking is working.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's similar to reading. I have a similar feeling about people reading, because it's really important that as professionals we're continually learning, we're continually helping to understand our work, our I was going to say industry. I don't. It's not an industry, but our professionalism, the area in which we specialise in, to understand the people who we might be working with, and the best way to do that is by reading a lot. And I do think sometimes that it's like, oh, well, you're just reading. You should do that in your spare time. And it's like, no, this reading is important. It's developing me. I need to do it whilst I'm bright and alert and in the morning, and not after an 8-hour day or whatever. And I think yeah, we do have a bit of an attitude towards work in this country, and I don't know if it's the same in others, that's like, if you're sat at your desk typing or you're in a meeting, that's proper work,
That's work.
but actually other things aren't necessarily. But I still think they absolutely can be. I saw there's a lady who is a chartered financial planner who I met a few years ago, and so she posted on LinkedIn yesterday about how she'd had a walking meeting with one of her clients. So somebody had wanted to talk about their financial position, but they wanted to do it while they were walking, because it's a lot easier because you're side by side, so you're facing forwards. It's like driving. So you can kind of open up more easily, and it's that kind of space and time and whatever. And I thought, I wonder, she runs her own business, but I wonder if she was working within a corporate environment, what the bosses of that company would perhaps think if you were to do that.
Yeah, I think there's certainly been a lot of research into therapy anyway, done out walking about, and I have done it myself from time to time, and what I would say is that it is a great way, if you've been working with a client in either via Zoom or face to face in an office. If you're at a point where you're really quite stuck, where you've reached an impasse, sometimes getting out and walking, you're in a different place. You know, the fact that you're not hemmed in by four walls, you're breathing the fresh air. You know, you are suddenly shifting, and where before there were no possibilities, suddenly there are. And it is a lovely way to work. And why not? As long as it's safe, as long as you are still that professional, you know, and you're not just turning it into a friendly chat, you know, then it's a good thing to do. And you're still working. Of course you're still working.
Yeah, absolutely. We're coming towards the end of our time together. I knew that you and me could have chatted for all day easily. But I just want to touch on co-parenting, because I know that's an area that's very close to your heart, and it's an area that is close to my heart because I am a co-parent. And I wondered if there was anything that people could do that whilst they were going through the emotional upheaval of divorce, that anything that you would suggest people do to help them get onto the right co-parenting path from right at the beginning, from early on?
I think I use this analogy a lot because I think it's really relevant. And what I would say, and often say when I'm speaking, is that if somebody said to you, Tamsin, tomorrow or next week, where are we now? Thursday. So next week, you've got to go and climb to Mount Everest base camp.
Okay.
Okay. What do you think that you would need in order for you to achieve that safely and, in a way that means that you can carry on functioning when you get back? What kind of things would you need? Certainly if somebody said that to me, I would be thinking, firstly, where is it? My geography skills are useless. That is not my skill set. I have a daughter who she's just doing her mountain leader assessment this week. She's amazing. She could get you anywhere. I would go and speak to her. Where is it? How do I get there? What kit would I need? Do I need to do any training beforehand? What nuggets of information would I need that means I could probably achieve this in a good way? Do I need anybody to come with me for support? I would be asking all of those questions. How much is it going to cost? How can I do it in a way that isn't going to cost me an absolute fortune? I need to know those little nuanced pieces of information, like, so many people are pushed off the path by yaks every year and die. I need to know that information. That's crucial. Somebody going through a separation and a divorce, and especially when they have children, that is their trip to Mount Everest base camp. Sure. So what do you need? What do you think you need to help you get there, get through it safely? And to think about that when a relationship breaks down, it's a couple relationship that ends. If you've got children, you are still a family and the needs of your children remain the same. You're on a two journey, relationship breakdown and the beginning of co-parenting. Keep the journey separate, because the behavior that you go through when a relationship ends, the emotional journey is grief. Those 5 stages. You go through it, your ex goes through it, your kids go through it, all the extended family and friends will go through it to a greater or lesser extent. The behavior for some of those emotions looks the same in children as it does in adults. The reasons for that behavior differ. Don't confuse the two. So on a day when you get out of bed and you're angry that your ex has left you for somebody else, or just because they don't love you anymore, or whatever it is, the day you get up feeling like that because you're in anger today, it may be that your kids get up and they're cross today. You might easily assume, having asked them, what's the matter today? You seem a bit cross. I'm cross because I haven't seen Daddy. Daddy's gone. You might think Daddy's gone. Yeah, he has gone. You might think it's the same. They're missing that parent.
Yeah.
You're grieving the loss and you are feeling rejected, and you are, a lot of different things to what your child is going through. Don't assume they're the same as you, because they're not.
That's really good advice. I'd never thought of it in those terms before, but that's incredibly useful. We are coming towards the end of our time together. I just want to ask if there's anything that I should have asked you that we haven't covered.
Oh, I don't think so. I think we've been all over, haven't we, today? No, it's been really lovely, Tamsin. Thank you for asking me to be on the podcast. I've really enjoyed it.
It's been an absolute pleasure to have you. Thank you, Adele. And thank you for joining us. And if you have enjoyed today's podcast, please do leave us a review and please do sign up so that you don't miss any episodes. And we'll see you soon.